Max was on top of me. Max was kissing me. I shoved him off and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. Dude, what do you do? I tried, but he lunged at me, grabbing my face with both hands and holding his lips over mine. I tried to break free, but I couldn't. He was holding me too tight. Mm! I groaned, trying to pry his hand off my face. This guy was pretty strong. Mm! I screamed louder, ripping at his arms and punching him in the stomach and chest. He seemed completely unaffected by it, so I gave up and just sat there, letting him kiss me. Finally, he stopped and pulled back. I freaked, leaping to my feet and tumbling through the wardrobe door onto my back and a bike. Max stood and looked out from the dark at me, eyes glowing with white and blue streaks. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Max. Found you! Gunnar cried, bursting into the room. Then he laughed and ran off. When I looked back up at Max, his eyes were back to normal. I blinked and rubbed my face, unbelieving. You. I stuttered, raising a shaky hand to point at the boy. Max stepped out of the wardrobe and grabbed my shaking hand, hauling me to my feet. He looked down at me and grinned. Saw it on a movie. 7 minutes in heaven. I wanted to try it, he said, and then walked through the mess to the door. I suppose since we got caught, we don't have to hide anymore. And then with that, he left. I stood there stunned, my lips tingling, feeling like I had just been violated. I knew there was a reason I didn't trust that guy, but holy crud, he's an actual alien. And not just any alien, the alien that had kissed me on the field. I wasn't crazy. The alien was gay, definitely bi. My mind has just been seriously fucked up the ass sideways, metaphorically. I shuddered and scrambled out of the room into the hall. There were people coming down it towards me in the stairs. I could hear Gunnar up the end calling out things, so I guess these were the people who'd also been caught. Max was nowhere to be seen. I waited for the people to pass and then followed them downstairs into the living room. V was sitting on the couch, and Marco was laying on his stomach over the coffee table, pretending to swim on it. I leapt over to him and jumped onto his back, laying over him and swimming too. Go, my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pal, I cried, and Marco laughed. Ahoy, he shouted to V. I sat on Marco's lower back and patted his butt for V to join me. She came over and straddled Marco too, wrapping her arms around my waist. Onlookers were laughing, glad for the entertainment while they waited for everyone else to be rounded up. Onwards to a land undiscovered by man, I cheered, arm up to the sky. Or woman, I added because V poked me in the side, and it really hurt. Can someone get me a donut? I need fuel to get us across the ocean, Marco said, flailing his arms, trying to swim. A girl hopped up and went off to the kitchen. Of course she would. Marco would click his fingers and the girls would come running, not that he would actually try. A cold chill ran down my spine and made me shudder. You know that feeling you get like someone is watching you? I pulled away from V and looked around, getting goosebumps. What is it, babe? You're acting so strange tonight. Is everything okay? Is it something to do with me? Vienna asked. I raised my eyebrows and looked at her like, are you a freaking idiot? And she laughed. Okay, so it's not me, giggled my girlfriend. I smirked and grabbed her face, crashing my lips hard on her and kissing her hungrily so she was reassured. Trust me, it's not you, I told her, and then opened her door for her. V smirked and hopped in, then said goodbye and drove off. I placed my hands in my pockets and looked up at the starry sky, taking in the fresh night air smell. It was a nice night, warm but cool. Do you see the Antomi cruiser? A voice asked me curiously, and I laughed, looking down to see Marco on his way back up the driveway. I opened my arms out, and he ran at me, crashing into me and hugging me. He lifted me off the ground and spun me before placing me back down. Marco and I, two most straight guys, or even guys in general, they won't understand our relationship. We got called gay a lot back in lower high school, but now it's sort of just ignored, if not accepted. I don't think people can understand how we can have so much skinship without being gay or having any romantic feelings for each other. I think it has to do with the fact that we're like female best friends. Girls are always hugging and stuff. I've seen it. V is even like that with whatever her name is. They're always holding hands when they walk around, or hugging, or grabbing each other's butts. And that's what Marco and I do, minus the holding hands thing. Gross. Anyway, half the girls in our school love it, so the guys lay off us. I don't see him, I said, pointing at the sky. Marco still had his arms around my torso as he looked up at the sky with me. Pity. I could replace Captain Soutfire now that he's getting old. Marco laughed, and I laughed too, because we're weird. Fine, that makes me duper void. I poked my tongue out. Oi! Homos, get your gay butts in my bed, Gunnar called from his bedroom window above us, laughing. Then he threw a pillow at us. Marco grabbed the pillow and shoved it down the back of his pants to make a booty, then turned it up to Gunnar and shook what his mama gave him. My booty brings all the boys to the yard, Marco cheered, hands on his hips. I slapped his sagging pillow butt and ran inside. Tonight was going to be interesting. We weren't going to sleep at all. Marco, I whispered to my best friend who was spooning me from behind on Gunnar's bedroom floor 5 hours later. Polo, Marco laughed into the back of my neck. There's something I have to tell you. I sighed, wondering how he was going to react. He shoved me away and scooted out of the bed, sitting up, staring at me with wide eyes. Please don't tell me you're gay after I was just spooning you. He gawked. I laughed at the weirdo. No, I'm not gay. It doesn't really have anything to do with me, I explained, glancing up at Gunnar. He seemed pretty much fast asleep now, so I think it was safe. It's not that I didn't want to tell Gunnar, it's that I don't think he'd really understand. He's not religious, but his parents are, so he's kind of close-minded too. It's about the new kid, I continued. Because Marco didn't move, he raised his eyebrows and crawled back over to me, getting back under the blankets. I was facing him now so that we could talk properly. Max? What about him? Marco seemed keen, so I felt no pressure and just told him everything. Max is an alien, I started, and then spilt all the info, minus the part about him kissing me. I explained that when he touched my skin with his, that's when I felt the buzz, not from a kiss. When I finished, Marco stared at me. He lifted an eyebrow. Are you serious? He asked slowly, warily. I punched him in the shoulder. Have you ever known me to lie to you? I asked, offended. Marco nodded and turned to lay on his back, looking up at the ceiling. Wow, he said finally. That changes things. Then, that was that, and I rolled back over, and Marco continued to spoon me. Has your butt always felt like that? Marco asked. Gunnar was in his own bed, up somewhere behind us, and I was facing the door. Marco and I were sharing a blow-up mattress and a blanket, with 2 separate pillows. But from my experience sleeping in the same room as Marco, I'd learned he'd like to cuddle. So I let him spoon me from time to time. Sometimes I spooned him back. I started to beat him with my pillow. Get your hands off my gluteus, I whisper warned him, whacking him once again. He just chuckled and held his arms over his face. Get a room, Gunnar groaned, throwing something down at us and missed entirely over my head, hitting the bedroom door. I laughed, getting up and jumping onto Gunnar's bed, and on top of him. Marco jumped on top of me. No thanks, I don't want to lose my virginity to you two, Gunnar groaned, shoving at my side to roll me off of him. I laughed into the blanket. I thought Martha Rivers had that, Marco teased, earning him a swipe at his head, but he dodged it. I thought it was Becky Skinner, I continued, resulting me with a nipple gripple. I screamed and fell off the bed, taking Marco with me, and we landed with a thud. I rubbed at my sore chest. What time is it? Marco asked me, clambering back onto the bed. Marco can act pretty well, cute at times, which some people find out of character because he's usually quite sexy and manly. To prove my point, Marco stood, ripped off his shirt, and revealed his six-pack. He ran his fingers back through his hair and dropped his shirt on Gunnar's head, who threw it back at him. This resulted in them having a weird, manly wrestling match on the floor. I looked over at the clock, still slumped over the side of the bed, and scratched my chin. I needed to shave, but obviously I couldn't do it now. I opened my eyes wide and gawked. Whoa, dude. It's 7 a.m., I cried, getting up. Gunnar and Marco paused to look at the window. Sure enough, there was light coming from behind the curtain. Morning, Marco said, holding his hand out for Gunnar to shake. Gunnar shoved him down onto the ground and got up. I'm going to be dead at work later, he groaned, and then left to have a shower. Marco laughed and crawled onto his hands and knees over to my feet. Meow, he said, and then cackled and belly flopped onto our mattress and was instantly asleep. He was weird like that. I decided I was as hungry as a lion, so I headed downstairs to the big, newly refurbished kitchen in Gunnar's house and looked for something to eat. I mused, scratching my bare chest. I looked in the fridge and in the cupboard, but there was a lot of food, but nothing snacky and nothing I was craving. I was kind of craving tacos? There was a noise over in the corner of the room. I froze, muscles going rigid, and turned to look to the right. There was just the dining table, a few pot plants, and the back door looking out to the fenced-off pool. Beyond that, there was the long green lawn to the back fence. A tree in the corner of the yard shadowed most of it. Not that you could really tell, because today was a cloudy, rainy day, and it was all gray outside, still fairly dank in the early morning. Something moved near the fence. No joke, something was actually moving, and it was coming right towards the house. It was big, as big as a car, and it leapt right over the pool, including the fence, landing on the pavement before the back window. I screamed and ran up the stairs, bursting into Gunner's room. I didn't remember closing the door, but I stopped, and my jaw dropped. Gunner was standing in the middle of the room, in the middle of getting dressed. He was completely naked, except for one foot in his underwear. He saw me and lost balance, stumbling backwards onto his bed floor. Marco groaned at the noise and lifted his head, eyes mostly closed from sleep, saw the scene, and burst out laughing so hard he was rolling on the ground on the floor. I dropped to my knees and cacked it too, while poor Gunner scrambled to pull his shorts on. When I recovered, I was shaking. Maybe it was the anxiety again. Maybe it was fear. I stood and glanced over my shoulder towards the staircase. There was no sign of movement, and I hadn't heard any noises of anything breaking in. In my moment of laughter, I'd forgotten about that thing outside. Guys, there's something in the backyard, I said to my friends, deadly serious. They both looked at me, still laughing. Like what? Gunner asked, looking around for a shirt. His muscles were on full display. He found a tank top and pulled it on over his head. Marco was still half naked. I don't know. It was huge. It came right for the door, I told them, that feeling of being watched creeping back. I shuddered and grabbed the cricket bat from beside Gunner's door, and then made my way back down the stairs warily. I heard Marco and Gunner following close behind. We made our way into the kitchen, and I looked across to the door and outside. There was no sign of anything, so I crept over and peered out. Nothing. The door was locked, so I flicked it open and pushed it open carefully, looking around. Nothing again. Gunner pushed past me and walked out, hands on his hips, looking around. Dude, there's nothing here, he said. The feeling of being watched was still there in the back of my mind, but I stepped out, too, and sighed. I swear I saw something. I frowned, letting my muscles relax a bit. Marco ruffled his hair, coming out behind us. Looks fine to me, he said, not even bothering to look properly. Then there was a crash from upstairs, inside the house. Max. I left the party because it was getting awkward. I kissed Tyler. I couldn't help it, I had to. He was just sitting there and my human emotions had gotten out of hand. I was having a hard time controlling them. Back on Jupiter, my native species weren't used to strong emotions, and so many of them. Being in this human form was something I was having trouble getting used to, which only made me feel confused, agitated, aggressive, unnerved, tired, and something else I couldn't find a name for. As I walked down the street, I let my eyes glaze over, hacking into my database files and flicking through the Earth section. There was a lot in there, but not enough to help understand all this. Frustrating. Frustrating? That's the only one I was missing before. So many emotions. I couldn't understand them all at once. But on the bright side, I was getting the hang of things. I could run and jump now, so that was good. My speech was getting better, too, and I could control the muscles on my face more. So many expressions to learn. My eyes unglazed, and I stopped under a street lamp. The human brain confused me, and there was so much of it unused. It was like the brain was designed for my people's intelligence and power, but they hadn't accessed it yet. I tilted my head to the side, looking at a car parked in front of me on the... I did a quick file check. Curb of the road. I flicked a finger, making the car alarm go crazy, and the front and back lights flash on and off in time. The light of the street lamp above me burst from the power surge, and bits of glass fell around me. Not on me. Nothing could touch me. I cracked my knuckles. Strange movements. I had been forced to motion instead of just mind power because this body was still weak. I sighed. It was a strange feeling. So was breathing. Breathing. What a bizarre concept. I decided to try something, so I turned and headed back to the party. I climbed one of the trees outside easily and sat at the top, looking down at the front yard of that human's house. Tyler came out with that girl who'd been nice to me. There was another girl with them, but I wasn't interested in her. She got in the file check car, but Tyler grabbed Vienna, and I fell back and dropped off the branch, but then grabbed the next one down and saved myself. That was close. I hung there staring at Tyler kissing Vienna. How could he, after I'd just kissed him? That was so infuriating? Infuriating! Vienna left, and then Tyler stood there looking up at the sky. I pulled myself up onto the branch and groaned. I laughed at groaning because it felt funny, and it sounded funny. It was very amusing. I zoomed in, focusing my eyes, and watched Tyler's face. He was so Handsome. Marco came along, and then they went inside. I waited for a little while, then dropped to the ground and righted myself. I'd see him on Monday at school, so there was nothing I could do until then. I headed back to my home, or at least the place I was staying while I was here. Crash landing on a weird new planet was a strange thing. Not that we didn't know about Earth. The whole solar system knew about Earth. It was the noisiest planet in the universe, always sending noisy rockets and ships and satellites out. I liked sitting on the roof of my home, listening to the concerts they had. Music was good here, but there was really some bad stuff too. The stuff called country music. Eesh. It made my ears hurt. Anyway, crash landing wasn't fun. I was going to send out a help signal, but then I ran into Tyler during the storm. How could I go after seeing such a handsome him? I approached my front door and froze. There was a strange smell in the air, something metallic. I dived onto my stomach and rolled under a bench as the footpath exploded in flames beneath me. They found me. I rolled out from under the bench on the side and then ran straight for the fence. I leapt over it and rushed as fast as this human form would let me down this side of the house into the backyard. If they were coming for me, I couldn't fight them as a human. I grabbed the stud in my right ear and pressed it tighter together. It beeped as the stud changed from blue to red, and a shudder ran through me. I caught my reflection in the back door of the house. I was back to normal again. I leapt up onto the roof in one bound and crawled to the top point, glancing into the front yard. There was a ship shielded in the middle of the street. I could only see it because of my trained native Juperian eyes. I knew who they were. Martians. Two big black creatures were stepping out of the ship, covered in armor and armed with laser cannons. They had 4 huge clawed legs, long spiked tails, and a long neck with dinosaur-like heads. They were about the size of a minibus each, and lethal. My people have been at war with them for nearly a millennium. They're the reason I'm marooned on this planet. I needed a place to hide after being shot down, and now they found me. It's going to take forever to shake them now that I'm grounded. I pried my ears up and listened to them. Thankfully, my mother had forced me to learn their native tongue back at school. I must remember to thank her. Said the taller one of the two, which roughly translated to, "The parasite is around here somewhere." My mind automatically translated their dialect. "We can't let him escape," answered the other. "Where did he go?" "I don't know." Martians aren't the brightest creatures in the universe. The only reason they have so much power is because of their warlike nature. Mars is the planet of war. Everyone knows it. "I have an idea," the first one said. I smirked. "Careful, big guy. Don't want to hurt yourself," I whispered to myself, suppressing a laugh. "The human boy," the Martian continued. I froze. He better not mean what I think he means. "The Earthling boy?" the other asked, and then pulled out a techno screen and flicked through something. Ah, yes. Tyler Montgomery. "Those bastards are dead." They turned and headed towards their ship as I leapt over the roof, pulling my weapon out of my back pocket and clicking it ready to go. But as I was too slow, they flew up into the air and off. It wouldn't take me too long to get to Tyler's house from here, now that I wasn't in human form, but I'd have to change to be in public, or I'd get found out. There was a reason I chose Australian over American. I'd stolen enough science fiction movies to know that in America, I'd be on a slab being dissected right now. Australia was my safest bet. The people here were relatively easygoing. I snuck around the back of Tyler's house, just as the ship landed in the front lawn. I de-shadowed from human and climbed up the wall to Tyler's bedroom window. I'd have to wake him and take him somewhere before I could explain. I opened the bedroom window and rolled in, creeping over to the bed. Then my jaw dropped. He wasn't there. Was I too late? Anger filled me, and I ran through the house, bursting out the front door to face the 2 black Martians. They seemed stunned to see me, but I was ready for them. I ripped my weapon out, a plasma spear bow, and shot both of them between the eyes before they could say "Huji Fu," and you don't want to know what that means. The bodies melted as they died and turned to puddles of tar on the ground. I'd have to clean that up to hide my cover. I stepped towards them and froze. That smell was still in the air, and it shouldn't be. I knelt, bow still ready, and looked up at the ship. It rumbled and then took off. Crap. I should have known that there was more of them. Did they have Tyler aboard? I quickly scooped up the mass and dumped it in those weird green wheelie bins before heading off. I had no idea where to look for the ship. Luckily, I managed to grab one of those techno screens from the bodies. It had a tracker. I hid it in a bush out the front of Tyler's house and checked the screen. They'd gone into the atmosphere, circling the town. That meant they didn't have Tyler. My heart slowed as I relaxed a little. He was safe for now. He wasn't at home, so there were 3 places he was most likely to be: Vienna, Marco, and that other guy who held the party. I would have to try all 3. I just pray I get to him before the ship does. Marco. There was a crash from upstairs, inside the house. Gunnar and I both turned to look at Tyler, who gripped the cricket bat he was holding tightly. Nothing, huh? He said, deadly serious, glancing up at the window closest to us on the 2nd story. Gunnar walked over to the pool fence and grabbed a metal t-ball bat. Now I was the only one unarmed. Great. I quickly looked around. There didn't seem to be anything in sight. Even greater. How did it get in the house? I asked. My brain worked through topics quicker than most people, so people usually thought I was random when I wasn't. The door was locked when we came down, Tyler thought out loud. He squinted, a sure sign his brain was working hard. Did we lock the front door? Gunnar asked, looking me in the eyes. I shrugged. How was I supposed to know? What do you think it is? Gunnar continued. Tyler had fallen silent. I knew what he was thinking because I was thinking the same thing. Max was an alien, and we didn't know if he was alone or not. There was another crash, making us all jump. I couldn't move, my legs were frozen stiff, but Tyler was edging towards the back door, which was still open. Don't, I warned him, but he wasn't listening, and then he stepped inside and disappeared. I looked at Gunnar, who was looking at me, and then he followed after him. Damn it, now I had no excuse. I rushed up the back veranda to the shed and ripped the door open. Right inside the door was a pitchfork. Perfect. I grabbed it and then ran back to the house and leapt inside. I left the back door open for an easy escape and saw Gunnar and Tyler at the foot of the stairs. There was banging around upstairs, like something was looking for something, or something was looking for someone. Gunnar and Tyler headed up the stairs while I stayed behind. I crept over to a wall near the front door and pressed my back into it, looking this way and that. I'd seen enough horror films to know what you shouldn't do, so I had my back covered. I checked the ceiling every now and again to make sure nothing was crawling towards me up there, and I kept an exit nearby. I bet this was just Max playing some sort of trick now that Tyler knew about him. I still wasn't sure if I believed it, though I do believe in aliens. If Max is E.T., then I'm sure he's definitely one of the good ones. He's too nice not to be. The floor and walls began to vibrate along with a strange humming noise. I spiked my ears up to listen in. The sound was coming from upstairs, and I turned to look. Suddenly, the world tipped upside down. Plaster exploded from the ceiling, and I was knocked to the floor closer to the door. I rolled onto my back and looked up to see a huge, muscly, black-clawed arm retracting back through the hole it had just created amongst the dust. Holy freakarooza! The front door burst open, and I was pulled to my feet and turned around to see Max. Only it wasn't quite Max. He was green with 3 glowing eyes and gills and spots. Get out of the house, he told me, and then picked up the pitchfork I'd dropped. In his other hand was this weird pointy thing, and ran towards the stairs, leaping with ease over huge chunks of roof. I ran out the front door and didn't stop until I was on the road. I looked back at the house, and from the street, everything looked normal. Just a cloudy early morning in a peaceful, rich neighborhood. Wait, did Max have pointy ears? Tyler. The hall was empty when Gunnar and I reached the top of the staircase. Gunnar tapped my shoulders and then took the lead, heading towards the first door. The back of my mind couldn't help but acknowledge it was the room where Max had kissed me. I quickly brushed it aside and followed after Guns. There was a clicking sound that sent shivers down my spine. I turned slowly and looked behind us to where the noise was coming from. Behind the railing of the staircase near the galley window I had no idea. I grabbed Gunnar's hand and pulled, making him look. What? He began to hiss before his jaw dropped too. The black blob was growing, arms sprouting out of its body, claws here and there. I began to tremble. The only escape from this level minus jumping out of a window was the staircase, and going down there meant going near the creature. I decided it was worth a shot. I lunged for the staircase, but the creature thing was faster than I expected, and it dived for me. I skidded to the side of the stairs, crashing into a wall. Then I crouched as it ripped a hole in the wall. I jumped back as another arm came down at me. I managed to get out of the way, but the arm crashed right through the floor. I shuffled back to Gunnar and stood as the thing climbed over the stair railing. My window is above the pool, Gunnar whispered to me. I nodded, and we began to edge up the hall to Gunnar's bedroom. The walls and floor began to shake as the alien grew and turned 2 lizard-like eyes toward us. Run! I shouted to Gunnar and turned, yanking him after me into his room. I locked the door and raced to the window, yanking it open. There was an explosion that shook the house, making me trip. I stumbled out the window. Fortunately, my jeans got stuck on something, and I hung upside down over the pavement. Guns? Now would be a good time to come to my rescue, I called nervously, eyeing the concrete 2 stories beneath me. If I fell head first, I heard a rip, the sound of denim, and I dropped a few inches. Gunner? But there was no reply. Oh God, the monster got him for sure. Gunner. Tyler pulled me into a bedroom and then closed the door, locking it. I wanted to act. I wanted to get out of here, but for some reason I couldn't move. I was struck with fear. What the hell was that thing? I watched in slow motion as Tyler went to my bedroom window. He ripped it open, and then the ground shook, and I stumbled to the side, grabbing onto my chest of drawers to stop myself falling. When I looked back up, Tyler was gone. Wait, he wasn't. I could see his legs. Then I realized he was hanging out over the edge. My heart stopped. Guns? Now would be a good time to come to my rescue, I heard Tyler call. But right then, I was thrown to my bedroom floor as something crashed behind me. I rolled onto my back to see the door being blown to pieces and a huge black lizard thing standing in the doorframe, taking up all the space. Its eyes locked onto me, and it growled, baring its teeth. Then it pulled something out of its holster and aimed at me. Gunner! Tyler shouted. I couldn't move. The weapon began to light up as it charged, and a red dot appeared on my chest. I was going to die. This was it, and I couldn't even help my best friend. I closed my eyes tight and braced myself. Bam! There was an explosion, and then I was splattered with hot goo. I pried one eye open, realizing I was still alive, and looked at the empty space in my doorway. It was now drenched in black goo. The new kid stormed through the doorway, not even looking at me. With a fierce expression on his face and something long and sharp in his hand, he ran straight to the window. Tyler. There was an explosion behind me, but there was no way I could see what happened. Rip. My pants were tearing further, and I inched another inch to my death. My stomach whirled. I felt like I was going to be sick. All the blood in my body was rushing to my head, and my cheeks were burning. I was starting to feel dizzy, but I dug my fingers into the bricks and hung on for dear sweet life. Then I was being yanked backwards. I let out a scream, but it was faint, before I was hoisted back inside. My knees hit solid ground and my stomach lurched. The room was spinning before my eyes as it returned back to its normal state right way up. I stared into 3 glowing bright eyes before everything went black, and once again, my world tipped sideways. I had no idea how much later it was when I finally woke up again. It was still daytime. I could tell because the sun was shining through the window right onto my face. I squinted and put my hand up to shield my eyes. He's awake! I heard Marco cry, and suddenly his face was hovering over mine. I was laying down, so I sat up and looked around. I was on one of the couches in Gunner's living room. How did I get downstairs? Are you okay? Marco continued to ask me. He was smiling, and I smiled back. Yeah, I think. I nodded. I did feel fine. A bit faint, but fine. What happened? I looked around the room and saw Gunner leaning against the wall in the corner. He had his arms crossed over his chest, and he wasn't looking at me. Well, Marco began, then frowned. Actually, I'm not sure. Mucking around, having a pillow fight in Gunner's bedroom, and you got too close to the open window or something, and you spilled out. Luckily, your jeans got caught on something, and then I hauled you back inside. I frowned. Really? Is that what happened? I searched my memory bank, and sure enough, what Marco had said was all there. I remembered hanging and fearing for my life, screaming out for help. I shuddered. What's up with Gunner? I whispered so the brooding boy wouldn't hear Marco sigh. He's ashamed with himself for not helping you. He was scared and... Marco trailed off as he looked at our friend, too. Poor Gunner. It's okay, man, I called to him, but he didn't show any signs of recognition. After that, I headed home. I was certain I'd never go anywhere near Heights again after this. When I reached my house, I was surprised to find a police car out the front. What were the coppers doing here? I stepped inside the house and turned to the living room to see my mom and dad on one couch and a policeman and woman on the other. My mom looked worried, while my dad looked angry. I dropped my backpack by the door as all 4 eyes turned to look at me. Is this your son? The policeman asked. He was tall with dark hair and a rough face. His eyes were black and hard. No nonsense. He was definitely the bad cop. Yes, my mom mumbled, hand shaking and covering her mouth. Please take a seat, Tyler, the female said, with curly red hair and soft green eyes. The good cop. Typical routine. I went over and sat on the floor, cross-legged, next to my mom and the coffee table. I still felt pretty edgy from the early morning experience, mixed with a lack of sleep, so having to face two coppers wasn't going to go down well. "What's going on?" I asked, frowning, looking up at my parents. "Someone broke into our house last night," Dad said, eyes glazing over. I raised my eyebrows in shock. "What?" I gasped. "How? When?" "Please calm down," the female copper said to me. I coughed to clear my throat and tried to take a deep breath. "It appears the trespassers broke into your bedroom window, Tyler, and then made their way through the house and out the front door, leaving it open," the bad copper said, writing stuff down on a notepad. "My room? Why? It's on the top floor," I gasped. Our house was unique thanks to my parents' artistic style. It was the only two-story house in this block of town. Downstairs was like any normal house. There was a lounge room, kitchen, laundry room, bathroom, dining room, and a spare bedroom. Then, near the front door was a staircase, and upstairs was two bedrooms, mine and the master bedroom, and the master bedroom had a small bathroom. Because of this, my bedroom had two windows, one that faced the yard, and one that looked out over the roof at the chimney. I often went out and sat on the roof to watch the sunrise when I couldn't sleep. We're not sure. The window was definitely forced open. But considering the perpetrator didn't actually steal or damage anything, there's not a lot we can do. It's just a case of BNE, the female copper explained. My mom let out a sob, and Dad hugged her. "I don't think I can feel safe in my own home anymore," she wailed. "I definitely don't want you staying here, Tyler. If they can get into your room so easily." I grabbed at my mother, opening my mouth to protest, but Dad gave me a warning look, and I kept quiet. "Well then, we'll be off. If you need anything or see anything, feel free to call," the man said as the pair got up off the couch. I stayed on the floor as Dad led the coppers out and said goodbye. Then I turned on my mom. "Mom, how can you kick me out?" I asked her. She cupped my face, rubbing my cheek with her thumb. "Just for a little while. I want you to pack your things, and I'm calling Neil. You can stay with him for a week or two until things settle," she ordered. I groaned and stood up, storming past my dad up the stairs and to my room where I slammed the door shut. My bedroom was cold, the window still open and a breeze blowing in, making the curtains sway. A shiver ran down my spine with the feeling someone was watching me again. My room felt eerie and estranged. Okay, so my mom was right. I didn't feel safe in here anymore. I went to my bed and pulled out a suitcase from underneath it, placing it on my bed and opening it up. I filled it with all kinds of things that I needed, clothes and stuff, and then I turned to my comic book collection. I froze as I stared at the pile. There was something different about it. I went over and picked up the first one, the latest edition of Star C, with the alien on the front that looked like Max. My mouth dropped open, and the book fell to the ground as my memories from last night came flooding back in one hit, and I stumbled back onto my bed. The comic book fell open, and a small piece of white paper slid out from inside it. I frowned and bent down to pick it up. Unfolding it, I read the messy handwriting. "T. Don't worry. I'll be looking out for you. M." I read it twice, but all I could see were Max's glowing eyes.